Sanner, and I'm very sorry, but Tina Cordarelli couldn't join us today. But I wanted to welcome you to the Indiana Perinatal Network webinar series. My name is Lindsey Sanner again, and I'm going to be talking today about age as a disparity, including reflections from our WK Kellogg Foundation grant about teen breastfeeding in schools. So we can go ahead and get started. All right, go into all right. So today we're going to be first talking a little bit about adolescence and breastfeeding, and then we'll talk about some of the lessons we learned from the WK Kellogg grant about teen breastfeeding in schools. And then we will talk about ways that you can improve teen breastfeeding support in your community. And then if we've got time, we can get into how to frame the message for adolescents. Okay, first we'll talk about adolescence and breastfeeding. So the teen birth rate is at a historic low right now. There's on this graph, you can see that the teen birth rate is in dark blue, and it's been decreasing since 1990. And as of 2013, when this graph was published, the teen birth rate was the second lowest of all age groups. It's also been decreasing among all race and ethnicity groups, and it's decreased almost 60% from 1991. However, the teen breastfeeding rate has a large disparity compared to the adult breastfeeding rate. Only just under 60% of teens ever start breastfeeding, and compared to 75 and 85% of older adult moms. And then the rates drop off steeply. Most teens stop breastfeeding within 6 weeks, and only about 20% are breastfeeding at 6 months, and only 4.3% are breastfeeding at 1 year, compared to 21 and 36% of older mothers. And all mothers should have the opportunity to breastfeed their infants, and all infants should have the opportunity to be breastfed, including teenagers. So adolescent mothers have a lot to gain from breastfeeding's benefits. Teen mothers are more likely than adult mothers to be low income, to have rapid repeat pregnancies, to be overweight or obese, and to return to school or work soon after birth. And adolescents, because of these things, would benefit from breastfeeding their children, because their babies would be less likely to have to visit their provider for ear infections, respiratory tract infections, and GI infections. And let's talk a little bit about breastfeeding among adolescents in the literature. This is really an area that's limited. This seems to be somewhat of a taboo subject, and while there has been more literature on it lately, there's really not a lot out there. But we do know that adolescent mothers are knowledgeable about breastfeeding's benefits, but they do have a transition to parenthood that is unlike adult women. It's a little bit more traumatic, it's a little bit unexpected, it's new, and just because of their cognitive development at that age, they experience it differently than adult women do when they're transitioning to motherhood. And teens often have some barriers to initiation and continuation of breastfeeding. They tend to complain of nipple pain a little bit more. They have more of a perception of insufficient milk. They have strict time demands for school, but they're also struggling with this desire for independence from their own parents, and they can suffer from embarrassment or privacy concerns. And they're worried about how breastfeeding might impact their relationships. And Catherine, I'm seeing that you can't hear. Is this a problem for anybody else? If so, please type in the question box. If you can't hear me, I'm very sorry. Okay, great. Thank you. So let's move on. We'll talk a little bit about the W.K. Kellogg Foundation grant for teen breastfeeding in schools. This was a grant that was awarded to Indiana Perinatal Network. It was a pilot project to determine if schools would be an appropriate point of contact to support adolescent mothers who choose to breastfeed when they return to schools. We were able to have 8 different schools participate, including one school district. These schools were ranged throughout the state. They were in more rural and more urban areas. So we got a great representation of students throughout the state. There were some of the grant activities included providing the schools with a breast pump. We developed breastfeeding curriculum for FACS classes. We identified local community resources for pregnant and parenting teens in each one of the communities that were involved in the program. We developed relationships between schools and the community partners, and we distributed a breastfeeding newsletter to schools and community partners to help increase the knowledge of breastfeeding in these communities. So we provided schools with a breast pump. It was a multi-user hospital-grade breast pump, either a Medela Symphony or an Amida Elite that you see here. We also gave them guidance for setting up an appropriate lactation space, making sure that the room was private and comfortable, making sure that they had access to water so that they could clean their pumping supplies. And these pumping supplies were donated by Medela and distributed by the project coordinator, Tina Cardarelli. The schools then, after the grant was over, the schools were able to maintain ownership of the pump after the grant period. We also developed a breastfeeding curriculum for the FACS classes, Family and Consumer Sciences classes. This was developed by the Marion County Health Department staff, and you can get to that on their website, the Marion County Health Department website. I think you go to program areas and then to nutrition, it's linked there. It's called Life's Best Beginning. And it's a really great interactive education curriculum. And it has lesson plans about various topics related to breastfeeding, including the benefits and the cost savings, how it's normal, why mothers should consider it. It's really great, and it's developed to appeal to high schoolers. We shared this with the participating schools, and we also presented it at various conferences over the past 2 years. And we identified community resources for pregnant and parenting teens in each one of the communities that were participating in the project. We surveyed the delivering hospitals, the schools, and the community partners that we knew of to find if they knew of any other programs that weren't, that we didn't know about. And so we put that all together in a list. There's an example here, one for Lawrence County. And it contained, each county had resources listed about lactation, places where the teens could get lactation support. It had delivering hospitals, had childcare resources, so getting assistance with daycare. There was also a part about how to get assistance with bedding and baby items, as well as housing. And some communities also had hold on just a second. Okay, sorry about that. I was responding to a question. And these lists were distributed to the schools and the community partners as well in each county. They contained the links and often links to websites if there were available and phone numbers so that even if it was distributed by paper, it would, the teens would be able to reach out to those resources. This was to increase the awareness of other organizations and resources community so that people that were interacting with teens and the teens themselves could learn about what was available for them. And we also spent a lot of the time in the second part of the grant developing the relationship between the schools and the key partners. Key partners included the Delivering Hospital, the WIC program, or breastfeeding coalitions, and they helped to establish, we really worked to establish the lines of communication so that the schools could make referrals to these community resources, and they could ask for informational support when they encountered a problem that they weren't, that they didn't know how to solve. And it was, we really wanted to have a network of communication going between these partners and including the school. And it was really important that the school knew how to get in contact with the resources, but also that the resources knew how to get in contact with the school. Because the teen really could identify that she was pregnant at any one of these locations, and we wanted to make sure that no matter where she first identified, that she would get the resources that were available to her. We also distributed a breastfeeding newsletter to schools and partners. This was sent out once a semester to increase the overall knowledge of the benefits of breastfeeding among the school staff. It often contained news and research about breastfeeding and success stories from different Indiana hospitals or community organizations. This is a picture of one of the lactation area in the Bedford School, and they took a supply room that wasn't being used too often, and they made sure, because there was a lock on the door, and they set aside the space. They included a rocking chair, and the teacher of this was within their early childhood education center. So the teacher of that program came in on the weekend and painted it, and this wall you're looking at is the wall that the rocking chair looked at. So when a mother was in there pumping, she would look at these inspiring quotes and just feel supported that way. And the other walls of the room were painted that blue that the quotes are written in. So it was a really warm, enjoyable space, even though it was a supply room. And this was used by the teens, the parenting teens that went to the school, as well as the teachers that taught there. And one of our nurses at one of the schools said, so many of these young moms come back to school determined to provide their own milk for their baby. They try very hard, but there's very little or no support, and most of them stop within the first couple of weeks. And this just, she said this early on in the project, and this just kind of illustrated why we were doing this project in the first place. We wanted to make sure that these teens knew that they were supported when they got back to school, and that they knew while they were pregnant that the school would be able to support them once they returned after birth. Another director at one of the schools said, we never used to see dads or even know who the dad was, and now we see dads participating in the care. And we didn't interact with the individual students during this project too often, but it was really great to hear that that the mothers wanted to do the best for their baby, and that the dads were also involved. And the teens just want to do everything that they can, but they're trying to do that in an environment that wasn't always supportive. So this project functioned to make that environment feel just a little bit more supportive, so that these teens could continue breastfeeding for that much longer. So we can talk a little bit about the results. Because the project finished up in December. We had 5 schools and 1 school corporation finish the project of the 8 that started. 2 schools had to withdraw in 2014 due to administration or policy changes, but we don't feel that the withdrawal of those schools left those communities without support. One of the schools had an established parenting and pregnant student program before our project began. They also had an on-site breast pump prior to the project. And they had a great relationship with the hospital, which came into the school and taught the family and consumer science classes about breastfeeding each semester. Another school had a policy change that resulted in all pregnant students attending the alternative program across the street, which was also part of our project. And so even though that school withdrew, we were still serving the pregnant teens in that community. Throughout the project, we identified 19 community partners, and including 4 breastfeeding coalitions that we were able to involve and encourage the school to contact them and set up referral protocols. And all schools reported that they refer pregnant and parenting students to appropriate community resources. They all said that this project increased their relationship with the resources, and half are in regular communication with at least one of those resources. So the staff contacts at each school were knowledgeable of the resources within and outside of their own school for these pregnant and parenting teens, which you know, we were very pleased to hear. And often the referral to these resources was done with a handout or a verbal recommendation, but occasionally, depending on the relationship with the partner, the school was able to contact the resource on behalf of the student. And the schools and the partners both said that the quality of the relationship was increased. Most of them also said that there was still room for improvement. And so, although the project is over, we're still working to support these communities and make sure that they've got the resources that they need to continue the work. We'll help them by setting up meetings and finding new contacts if there happens to be turnover. And if the schools weren't in regular communication with the resources, they reported that they still knew who to contact when the need arose. And we were really pleased to hear that 4 of the schools brought community partners on site to train their staff about the infant feeding and breast pump use and maintenance. And some of them also had the community partners come in to talk to their students and to teach them the breastfeeding curriculum. So that was really a great result. Staff contacts at each school reported that they felt comfortable discussing breastfeeding with their students. And all schools reported that they taught their students about breastfeeding. However, the curriculum that Marion County Health Department developed was presented to the schools as a resource, not as a requirement. And so, although all schools reported that they are teaching about breastfeeding, not all of them are using that curriculum, and not all of them are teaching all of their students about breastfeeding, which is something that we would like to see, but we're not in a place to require them to do that. But it would do wonders for helping to normalize breastfeeding and to make it acceptable among teens and their peers. And then also, the pumps were utilized in all but one school, and this one school was in an area that has had some significant community barriers in the past year that's been in the news. And the physicians in this area just weren't comfortable recommending breastfeeding to their patients. We also weren't able to track individual students due to some barriers in approaching and contacting those students. But the schools reported that many students breastfed for only a few weeks, and that's great because any breast milk is better than none, but we really would like to see them breastfeed for longer, ideally. And a few reported having a student who continued to use the pump for multiple months, an entire school year, or even longer. And so that was really great to hear. This project taught us a lot about what teens need to succeed. We realized that the school schedule can create some big challenges. The school day makes communication slow because the teachers and the staff can really only respond before or after school, or maybe during a prep period. And the school calendar makes starting a project really difficult because in August they're ramping up, they're trying to get everything settled, they're trying to get used to the new students, to the new school, the new routine. And then you've got like 2 or 3 months until it turns into the holidays and people start winding down and taking finals, and you know, and then in January they're ramping back up, they're getting used to the new semester, the new routine, and then all of a sudden they start testing, and you know, the schools just have a lot of competing priorities, and they're on break during the summer, and it was just difficult sometimes to get communication started, and to have communication as fast as the partners seem to expect it. And also, for the students, the school day schedule makes pumping really difficult. They end up missing the same classes every day, and some teachers, if they aren't knowledgeable about breastfeeding, see this as unacceptable. And we had some reports of teachers not allowing students to leave the class to go pump. And you know, there was one unfortunate situation where a student went to the nurse crying after she was finally allowed, after the class finally was over, and her shirt was just soaked, and she said the teacher wouldn't let her out, and you know, it was so they had to do some education there. But you know, all in all, the schools were as supportive as they could be, but providing lactation support isn't something that schools inherently do, and so it was a new concept for them, for the staff. And you know, and it was a struggle to make it fit, but everybody tried, everybody did their best. They're also, schools can be outsider wary. They are very protective of their students, with good reason. They're protective of their teens and their teachers, and that's why we weren't able to track individual students, because you know, even if you know, we're an outside organization, and so we had to talk with the points of contact that we had, and change our measures a little bit to focus on some more qualitative measures rather than the quantitative measures of how many students were using the pump and how long were they breastfeeding for. We also found that pregnant teens are becoming increasingly hard to find. They seem to be encouraged to take alternative schooling, and once they do that, once the teens start taking a virtual school, they can't, the school loses contact with them, and then our points of contact at the school no longer can reach the teens, and they just kind of fall off the radar. And any lactation support that is available in the school is no longer available to them because the teens are no longer students of the school. And so that seemed to be increasing in frequency as the grant period went on. And while it is convenient for the teens because they don't need to worry about you know, finding transportation or childcare, it is a struggle for providing them with services. We also found that the attitudes of the adults are often at odds with the attitudes of the teens. Teen mothers are very much in the now, they're ready to move forward, and they just want the best for their baby. Whereas adults tend to feel that there's been a failure, this is a shameful experience that should be hidden. And it's just been interesting to see the dynamic at play. We had a few successes in non-traditional environments. I mentioned earlier that students from one high school were all encouraged to go to an alternative physical school for school-age mothers. And there was also the Early Childhood Education Center, and those two areas were very successful, and because of the non-traditional environment, I think the administration at that school and the people involved in the project saw the fit of lactation support a little bit easier than some of the more traditional principals and staff who had a very hard time thinking about a teen breastfeeding. And the teens really taught us and each other what they needed to succeed. We were able to go to that alternative school-age mother program, and we were able to view the teens in their native environment, and it was really great to see them interacting. They were very supportive of each other, and they knew what they needed to some extent, and they, it was really great to talk to them, and I'm so glad that we had that chance to go up and to view them. So one of the things we did after we realized that there seemed to be such a disparity in the attitudes of adults compared to the attitudes of the teens about breastfeeding and teen parenthood in general, was we developed a survey to see if these differences in attitudes were real or imagined. And so we emailed the survey to a convenient sample, including IPN numbers. If you participated, thank you very much. And participants, when they clicked on the survey link, saw one of these pictures and the following statement. Again, they just saw one picture or the other, not both next to each other. And they read the statement, "This is Kate," and then it listed her age, either 17 or 30. "This is Kate and her first baby, Jack. He's 13 months old. She's a single mother and she likes to jog." And then they were asked to agree or disagree with 14 different statements. And I just want to point out that this is the same woman and the same baby. She just smiled a little bit differently in photos and looked naturally younger in one compared to the other. And so we did add the blue streak to her hair, little Photoshop action there. But it's the same mom, it's the same person, and we did that to decrease bias so that the only thing that the participants could be reacting to between the two surveys was age. And so this was the results. And those who saw the picture of the teen Kate were significantly more likely to think of Kate and Jack negatively when they saw the teen picture compared to those that saw the adult picture. And on the right is the disagree, and on the left is agree. And so the farther something is to the right, the more the respondents on average disagree with it. And so I didn't put the key in here, I apologize. And so one of the questions was, Kate needs help to raise her baby. And the light blue are those that saw the teen survey, or the teen picture, and the dark blue are those that saw the adult picture. And the survey was taken by 223 individuals, including 88 nurses and 43 teachers. And overall, those who saw the teen survey responded more negatively to 13 of the 14 statements that we gave them. Teachers who saw the teen responded more negatively to 8 statements, and nurses who saw the teen responded more negatively to 10 to 10 of those statements. So I just ask to keep this in mind, and when you're interacting with a pregnant or parenting teen, please be aware of your own unconscious biases and recognize that these are mothers who have come to you for assistance because they want to do the best thing for their infants. Set those internal biases aside and treat them like individuals that have sought out your help. And so, in comparison, the teens had very positive reactions. The teens we were able to talk to had very positive reactions about breastfeeding. One of them said the first 2 weeks were very rough, or were very challenging. And then I got through that, and I learned that it seems like my body was made to breastfeed. Another one said, I noticed around his first birthday that I still had droplets of breast milk coming from my breast. So I tried to make him breastfeed, and he just wasn't having it. And she was so disappointed, retelling that story, because she really missed that closeness, that bond, and she just wanted to have that shared experience with her son again. But he was a year old, and he was no longer interested. And this teen said, "If I can breastfeed, anyone can." And that was, she had had kind of a struggle, and it was so heartening to hear these positive experiences from the teens. And so some components of success throughout, from the different program or the different schools that we worked with, they had supportive administration who saw the value in providing resources for these students to help them succeed in school. Often the whole staff was alerted in these schools with supportive administration. They would alert the whole staff that the pumps existed, and one school even trained the entire staff on how to use and maintain the pump. The schools had positive working relationships with at least one community partner, and they were able to provide breastfeeding support for as long as desired to the students who identified they wanted to breastfeed after they returned to school. And the successful programs at the end of the project were still expressing a desire to continue to support pregnant parenting students. On-site daycare was another benefit, but not a necessity, it reduces the strain of transportation and finding finances to pay for daycare, and it allows them, or the parenting students, to substitute at least one pumping session with an actual feeding. And so we can talk about how to do something like this in your community, how to improve breastfeeding support for teens in your area. And so you would want to start by choosing a backbone organization. This organization would act to identify and coordinate community resources. And we think that a breastfeeding coalition, WIC, or a hospital working on Step 10 and Baby Friendly would be really great at this. However, because of some of the struggles that we had working with the schools, mostly based on the fact that this is not something that schools normally inherently do, but these other organizations do, and also the issues around school schedules, we think that a school would be a great a great partner to bring into this resource to support the teens, a necessary partner. But we think that the Breastfeeding Coalition, WIC, or even a motivated hospital with an outreach department would be really great at serving this backbone organization role. Then you want to establish a network of community organizations to support the teens. Ideally, what you will be doing is creating a culture of referrals and communication that exists between all of those community organizations that the teens might interact with. So you want to come up with a list of the organizations and then have a list of contacts at each organization. Ideally, you would have 2 contacts just in case of turnover, so that, or you have a job description. So whoever happens to be in that role is the one that's going to be the point of contact for the other organizations. You want to then, ideally, you would establish procedures for referrals between these organizations, and you want to aim for a no wrong door structure, so that anywhere where a teen first identifies as pregnant, she would then become connected with all of the same resources. So, teens might, because this is sort of a taboo thing, teens might try to hide their pregnancy, and that delays the period of time available to provide them with education and resources. So no matter where she identifies that she's pregnant, be it the hospital, be it at a clinic, or at school, wherever, that she can then be funneled into this this referral network that would make sure that she gets access to all of those resources. And so the teens will come and go. They're only pregnant for 9 months, and then their baby is a year old after 12. And so the teens will only be there for a short period of time. So the teens really are not the target audience here. The point is to establish a network of referrals and a culture that will persist through many generations, or through many pregnant teens. And it's not, you don't want to focus so much on the girls. It's the community that surrounds them, to provide them with the resources to make sure that they can be successful for as long as they would like. And then you can engage and incentivize the schools as partners. And we started with the schools thinking that the teens spend a lot of their time there, and that this would be a great place. They spend so much time, they need help. There's adults there that care about them, and that is, all of those things are true. But because the schools don't, I've said it a couple times, but the schools just aren't set up to provide lactation support. But that's something that they can learn to do. And so having a backbone organization that brings the school in as a partner, we think would be a very successful model. And you could incentivize the schools to continue to participate. You could offer them staff trainings, and you could offer your assistance in developing accommodation plans and transition back to school plans. Something we realized was the schools at the beginning of the project, they had almost no knowledge of how breastfeeding and pumping would fit into the school day. And so you can help them figure that out and help them come up with a short-term plan that for as long as the mother needs to pump, she can do this schedule, this alternative schedule, or this amended schedule with regular breaks throughout the day. But when she's done, she'll go back to being a normal student, and she'll fold back into the classroom with her peers. You could also provide them with a multi-user hospital-grade breast pump, but that might not be as necessary as helping them set up a lactation space in their schools, because with the Affordable Care Act, mothers are able to obtain a breast pump for themselves through insurance. And so that's a great service. And if you can help them find a lactation, or find a space that would serve as a comfortable lactation space for these mothers to pump their milk while they're at school with their own breast pump, that would work too. And you can also help provide them with the breastfeeding curriculum for family and consumer sciences classes, either by coming in and teaching them yourself, or by just helping the teacher learn the curriculum and learn the material. And we did a survey in the winter, or late last fall, about of schools in Indiana, and 29 high schools responded. They were located throughout the state, or more than 29 responded, but 29 indicated that they would be interested in participating in a project like this to support their pregnant and parenting students. And so that was really great to hear. So there is a need and a desire for this kind of assistance throughout the state. And so if your organization is willing or able to provide this type of resource and to be that backbone organization, there's probably a school in your area that would be willing to participate. But even if there isn't, you don't need the school to do this. The community organizations can have that, that referral network just amongst themselves. And so there's some questions to think about. What is the best place to offer care? Teen moms can be unaware and naive of the kinds of care that they need. They don't know how to access it. They even might be unsure about how to get transportation to it. So think about where you can offer care for these teens in a place that, one, that they can find out about it, two, that they can get to. And how are you going to overcome the real barriers of gaining access to the teens? If you need to have a direct access to the teens to see how they're doing, to check in and to make sure that their questions are being answered. You know, the schools have barriers and protection policies, security and red tape around access to teens, and working with them directly often requires prenatal or parental consent if they're a minor. And during the grant, we witnessed more and more invisibility of the teens as these virtual and alternative schools became more commonplace. And the isolation of the teens created a huge barrier to access. So, you know, they're hard to find, and even when you find them, the schools are very protective of them. So, you know, how are you going to identify them and make sure that you can interact with them and get their questions answered and provide them with the support that they need? And then what educational approaches are optimal for teaching pregnant teens about breastfeeding? We learned a bit about how the teens would like to be engaged in the education, but there are many remaining questions about what current educational materials would work best for this population and what's still needed to be developed. And how will we dispel the idea that breastfeeding education and support are inappropriate for teens? We've faced many attitudinal barriers from adult educators, administrators, and even some community health partners that expressed their opinions that educating teens about breastfeeding was inappropriate and that it was unfitting for new mothers to pump milk in the school environment. One of the principals was very uncomfortable with us using the word breast and the phrase breast pump, and you know, wouldn't allow us to speak to the students or to parents about this because, you know, that was such a, you know, oh, you can't say that word in front of children? Well, they're 17 and they're pregnant, and this is a word that they need to know. And this is something that directly applies to them and can help them. But, you know, so we had to do some education there around what is appropriate and what resources could be provided appropriately. So think strongly about what you are doing to acknowledge and accommodate the needs of adolescent moms in the education and care that you currently provide. If the answer is not much, we invite you to jump in and engage this group of mothers. Not including them in your plan will only widen the current disparity gap. Tita Cardarelli did much of the day-to-day work for this project, and she said, "I've observed these teen moms to be largely marginalized and underserved. The opportunity to make a huge difference in outcomes on the long term is represented in these young women who are at the beginning of their reproductive life. The positive education and experiences that they have as a teen could go on to inform their practices for several decades and many future children." So really think about what you're doing to specifically address adolescent mothers in your program, in your organization, and make sure that you're actively including them. So we've got a little bit of time left. I can talk quickly about how to frame the message for adolescents, ways to support a young mother as she's deciding and learning how to breastfeed her baby. So adolescents have specific needs. They're at a different developmental stage, and they require more social support than older women. Developmentally, they're at a time where their peers and social interaction are incredibly important. And in general, teens want nurses and support that's provided by taking the time to ask what they already know, listening to their concerns, answering their questions, and then talking them through new situations. Not getting hands-on immediately without their permission, but you know, really taking the time to figure out what they know already, what they want to know, and then using your voice calmly to help guide them through. One of the teens said, "There are just too many rules in the hospital, too many people touching me, telling me what to do, not enough listening, not enough information." So the teens are both sensitive to and perceptive of how you're treating them. Another teen said, "They're slick with bribing us with coupons for free stuff, but we're just moms who want the best for our babies." So you don't need to incentivize these teens to, you don't need to bribe them into doing what's right. They already want to do that. You just need to put them in a culture or in an environment that allows them to make those choices. So for informational support, you want to start the discussion as early in pregnancy as possible, and that can be difficult because teens might hide their pregnancy, they might identify late. but as soon as you can start talking about breastfeeding in pregnancy, the longer they have to make that decision and to gain information. You also want to tailor the message based on what she already knows. You can address perceived barriers and highlight perceived benefits. So, you know, if somebody is very concerned that it'll hurt or that her friends will think it's gross or whatever, address those barriers. And then when she says, but it might make my baby smarter, or, you know, it'll make me closer with my baby, really talk up those benefits and highlight positives. And also, teens want to learn, not to be told what to do. So think back when you were a teen, when somebody told you what to do, you were like, oh, with one of those big eye rolls. And so if at all possible, you want to guide the teen into discovering the information on her own, she'll feel much more empowered that way. And you can do that by giving her some keywords to type into Google, or, you know, giving her a pamphlet or a book and letting her peruse it on her own. Just make sure that it's appropriate for teens and something that isn't going to be immediately off-putting. And then be sure everybody in your organization is giving consistent messaging to teens. And based on their cognitive developmental stage, short-term and social benefits might carry more weight than some of the other arguments. So that includes breastfeeding is less expensive than formula feeding. Once it's established, there's really no prep or dishes needed. You'll get back to your pre-baby weight faster, probably. Baby is less likely to get sick. And a lot of young mothers worried that the father and grandparents, her parents, aren't going to be able to be involved. She's very reliant on the social support networks she has. And so you want to reassure her that her parents and that the baby's father can still bond with the baby by holding it, diapering, bathing. You know, there are other ways to bond than just giving a baby a bottle. And so be aware that there are really very few resources that are directed to teens. They're just going to trip over an appropriate resource that's directed for them accidentally. They need help, and they need your help to help frame the message and to make it applicable to them. And then if hands-on support is needed, try to, at first, use a sensitive hands-off approach to show her how, and then use verbal cues to help her as she tries it out herself. Again, this helps her learn in a way and discover it on her own. You know, that'll be more likely to stick with her, and it won't incite that immediate eye roll and internal groan. So you want to provide her with choices so she can choose what's most comfortable for her. The adolescent teens in the literature do complain a little bit more about nipple pain and, so you just want to make sure that she's got different options so that she can, while your adult moms might not complain about something, it might be affecting the teens, or they might be more sensitive or perceiving it more strongly. So you want to make sure that she's comfortable. And you want to give her tips and tricks for understanding infant behavior. These are teenagers. They're young. They don't have a lot of experience with babies. And they're very stressful, tiny, loud things. And so anything that you can do to help her understand infant behavior before that moment where the baby's crying and freaking out and everybody's stressed and exhausted is going to be really beneficial. And that goes along with, you want to provide anticipatory guidance for dealing with the times when things can get a little bit stressful, like growth spurts and engorgement. And know that teens are unlikely to seek out help if problems arrive. So you want to make sure that your organization has follow-up procedures in place to support her and to reach out to her and make sure that things are going okay, or to check in and provide support when needed. And if at all possible, it would be fantastic if you could provide assistance for managing the transition back to school. Like I said, schools are generally unaware of what a lactating mom needs. And so advocating for her and helping her make that transition back would be really powerful. And then emotional support is very important with teens. It's very important that you treat her like she is worth your time and that she'll be successful at breastfeeding. You want to recognize and praise her efforts And you want to give her encouragement, which will give her the confidence to continue through difficult times. A lot of teens feel some insecurity about all of these new choices in their life that they're faced with. So it makes sense for moms to be insecure about the choice to breastfeed and unsure how to manage it. She's broken one of society's taboos, and she might be getting overt and covert messages that she's worthless. So you taking the time to really listen to her and to respond to her questions and to treat her like she's a person is going to be very powerful, and that will carry her through. So you want to make sure that you're also bringing in the teen's mother and partner, because that's support system is really important, and make sure that you create a sense of privacy as she's learning to breastfeed and as she's asking questions and as you're providing support. Teens are very sensitive to what others think of them, and so it's a very important thing to make sure that she feels safe and that this is a private, secure environment. And if at all possible, be present during feedings. Don't just give her the information and walk away and leave her to fend for herself. If you can just sit with her and reassure her as she's feeding that, yes, this is normal, yes, this is how it's supposed to go, you're doing a great job, you're a good mom, you know, that is very reassuring. And also you want to stay calm, relaxed, and consistent during difficulties. You just want to be that calm force. So, you know, we know that teens often have strong emotions, and so if you can be calm, if you are calm, they will be calm. You want to make sure that you know, you're just there to be a resource and to provide that help. And so teens are able and willing to breastfeed. They just need your help to do it, and they need an environment that allows them to make those choices and that supports them as they're choosing to breastfeed. So it's if you could create a network in your own community of community organizations, including hospital and WIC and lactation consultants and breastfeeding coalition if you have one, drop-in centers, if you can engage all of those partners to help a teen wherever she identifies that she's pregnant, to catch her and to provide her with all of those resources, that would be amazing, and I really encourage you to help support teens in that way. So I'm going to take a look and see if there are any questions that have come up. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to type them in the questions box in your little dashboard, control panel, whatever we want to call this. Let's see. Somebody said, has any discussion occurred to have breastfeeding introduced to teachers or staff on a statewide basis? I have heard some rumblings that the Family and Consumer Sciences or the health curriculum is being looked at, and there is some rumbling about including breastfeeding in that topic as part or within that curriculum and as a standard that schools would have to cover. I'm not sure when that discussion is happening, but that would be fantastic if that is made to be one of the educational standards, but it hasn't happened to this point that I know of. And then, has WIC participated in a teen outreach program? I know that WIC was strongly involved in all of the school or all of the communities that we were in. They were a great partner, and they were often one of the more involved partners. They willingly came into the school. They would talk to the students about what WIC was. They would talk to the staff, provide the staff with education. And so, you know, WIC is doing some great things around the state, and I think there would be a great backbone organization for this type of model. Somebody else said, in our area, students have to be back within 2 weeks of delivery. Have you heard similar things? Unfortunately, yes. It's up to each school, I think, about how soon the students need to return to school, and some of them are able to extend that with the alternative or virtual schooling. But it is not unusual, unfortunately, for students to have to go back to school 2 weeks after birth, and that can be really challenging, especially because breastfeeding might not even be fully established yet at that point. And so then asking the mom to readjust to the school environment, to include pumping in her schedule, it's a lot, and that helps explain why these moms are so likely to quit breastfeeding in the first 6 weeks. You know, there are a lot of struggles, and there's a lot of barriers that these teens need to overcome. And so having those discussions with schools about how it's so important to provide teens with the support once they get back, it's a big conversation to have, but it's really important to do that. Are there any other questions? Gonna give it a few minutes. Will the slides be available to print out? I will check on that, and if they can be printed, I will be sure to get you a link to share them. I have no problem sharing them, but they need to be, I need to get that approved with, to see if there's a way that we can get them distributed to you easily. Okay, I think that's it. I'm going to hand it back over to Marquette, and we have one more slide we need to show you. And to wrap things up, Tina wanted to see if I can do it. Tina wanted to share some information about the next webinar. We're working on it. Okay, well, there will be a webinar next month, and I encourage you all to join. I thank you so much for being here today and for taking the time out of your day to listen to this presentation. It's really important to include teens in your planning and in your organization. Just think about how to include them best, or how to include them at all, how to make sure that you're including them. And thanks so much for being here today, and we really hope that you can join us next time. I hope you have a great afternoon.